And a good Thursday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Great to be back with you here on 13 WMAZ Plus, and great to finally have some talkable weather here on the stream. We've had day after day of what seems like pretty significant rain chance, especially given the fact that the majority of the month of April has been very dry. So let's go over everything that you need to know. It's Thursday morning. We have a new drought monitor update. We'll go over some of the rainfall totals we've seen over the course of this past week and talk about which rain did get accounted for and which rain maybe necessarily hasn't gotten accounted for with the update of the drought monitor. So going back over the course of the last 5 days, you can find that the higher rainfall totals do sit in western Central Georgia. But we can see that there are some splotchy areas of green that go all the way down I-75. A few areas of some green actually down there in Chris County, or excuse me, yellow is what I was going to point out, because we can find another splotch of that up there in Monroe County, but those yellow splotches and even some flashes of orange are a lot more prominent back over into eastern Alabama, and you can see that the green does eventually transition into a darker blue color, which also eventually transitions into a very light blue shade. So of course, these areas down here in southeast Central Georgia that have laid under the worst drought conditions that we've had so far, they continue to just not have any rain in the forecast, very unfortunately. But let's take it piece by piece, at least north down to south here in Central Georgia, to talk some of these rainfall totals. So most areas that at the very most saw about an inch, maybe about an inch and a half of rain. That's going to be in those green shades. And once again, this is going to be over the course of 5 days. And then as we go over to the east, you see those totals get closer to around an inch. If you're more so in the dark blue shades, that's going to be closer to around a half inch, maybe about 3/4 of an inch of rainfall, and then eventually tapering off into just simply about a 1/4 inch of rainfall that we saw in Irwinton, Sandersville, and all the way down to Wrightsville. The most significant rainfall total, we find a 2.4-inch pixel right there in southeastern Monroe County. That's going to be around the Bolingbrook area, just to the north of I-75, kind of where 475 and 75 do come back together. Taking it down a little bit farther to the south, we can spot some more areas in this green that are once again going to be totals above an inch in nature, even down in Chris County, the very southern end of the county, 2.1 inches of rain. But once again, those totals taper off as you move farther over to the east, down to about a 3/4 of an inch of rain in Cochran and in Pulaski County near the Hawkinsville area, closer to about a half inch in Dodge County, close to Cadwell, and then getting over to the east. We did have some isolated pockets down here in southeast Central Georgia that actually got up to around an inch. That's going to be down there in Montgomery County, but for the most part, you're only seeing about a 1/10 to or maybe even 3/10 of an inch of rain. But the most important thing that you can see on this big picture view, everyone has received something in the way of rainfall, and that's going to at least be a start. And good news is we do have plenty more rain chances that are going to be ahead as we head into the weekend, especially these areas down in south central Georgia that are in some pretty bad drought conditions. So here's a look at your new drought monitor update, and you will notice a few changes. First and foremost, especially if you are a resident of Baldwin and Washington counties, that little sliver of what we saw was a moderate drought, and actually about 2 weeks ago it was an abnormally dry sliver. That has now been worsened into a severe drought, which does extend for areas like Macon, Warner Robins, down to Perry, Milledgeville, and getting into Washington County, Dublin, Wrightsville. I would say our most populated areas in central Georgia are lying under the severe drought, which is going to be kind of level 2 out of 4, if you will, if we were to put this in terms of an SPC risk with a thunderstorm outlook. But then we expand it into an extreme drought, which is going to be present mainly in northern central Georgia, all the way up into areas north of us. But we can see that that red shade does finally start to merge together with another patch of a red shade that we have seen over to the west, and now it's encompassing Monroe County, most of Crawford County, all the way down through most of Macon County and our southernmost counties, which eventually does worsen into that exceptional drought criteria where all but this one little northern sliver of Tulare County is in that exceptional drought, with the majority of our south and southeasternmost counties included in that very dark red shade, or more so a maroon color. So with the latest drought update that we have seen, we are going to get a drought information statement later on this afternoon that's going to provide us with some key facts and some key updates, where I did pull all the information for this graphic just about 2 weeks ago in time. but we already have some updates in terms of the coverage of certain areas of the drought across the entire state of Georgia. So now 100% of the state is going to be in a severe drought or higher. So let's go back to your drought monitor criteria: severe drought, extreme drought, and exceptional drought. Those are the only three categories of a drought that we have in the state of Georgia now. So obviously we don't have anything in the way of this kind of level 1 out of 4 risk for that drought. And of course, the abnormally dry conditions, which technically aren't drought criteria, but it does mean it has been quite a while without some rainfall. And in fact, 1/3 of the state is in that highest category, the exceptional drought area. So yes, it is a very, very bad drought. In fact, it is probably the first time that we have seen 100% of the state in severe drought or higher criteria since we started doing the drought monitor, which is going back about 26 years once we got to the beginning of the turn of the century. Farmers have delayed planting and field prep due to the ground being too hard and causing damage to the equipment that is typically trying to soften and stir up and mill all of that surface soil and dirt. Fire danger criteria has obviously loosened, but we haven't really been talking about that as of lately because we've had an uptick in the humidity content, very thankfully, but we still have wildfires that are down in South and Southeast Georgia that are getting more and more contained as we go day by day, but they are still hundreds and thousands of acres wide. So obviously it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a widespread rainmaker from Mother Nature in order to finally get all of those under 100% containment. This drought is expected to not only persist through the summer, but go well into the fall. And we're obviously going to need a whole lot of rain over the summer months and getting into the fall months to get most areas out of the very high drought criteria that they are under. But the month of April, at least as of recently, we finally recorded some rainfall again. So we had a very large gap in where we didn't record rainfall, even going back to this past Saturday, where we were talking about it as of late last week. That was one of our more impressive rain chances that we did have ahead, and no rain got recorded at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. So the dry stretch went from April 5th all the way into the 28th day of the month. That is 23 days without recording rainfall in the Macon area. And ironically enough, what we've had in the form of rainfall the past 2 days, it's been the exact rainfall total, 0.47 inches, so nearly a half inch, both of the last 2 days, to provide us with about another inch to our total for the month, which already stood at 1 inch before we did get this rainfall. So we're creeping closer to the 2-inch mark, but it still looks like we are going to fall below average for the month of April rainfall, which is only 3.5 inches. But obviously, we're not going to really be talking about rain chances in the cards today. But as we cross over officially into the month of May, in fact, May actually looks to be off to a pretty similar start to what we did have for the month of April, with a couple chances at some fairly widespread rain and maybe some substantial rain at the very beginning of the month. But obviously, we know from this past month, just because you get off to a wet start doesn't mean that it is going to be a wet month in total. So here's where the month of April does stand. It was creeping really close to how dry we were throughout the month of March. In fact, we might have even flirted with that number before that rainfall got recorded the last couple of days. But it does look like April actually going to mark at least the second wettest month that we've had so far throughout 4 months in 2026, but that's mainly attributed to the lower average rainfall total that we do see for the month of April all time, as opposed to January, February, and March, which, based on 30-year normals, those months are actually a bit more wet than what we do see in the month of April. So obviously that saying, April showers do bring May flowers. Well, number one, we haven't had too many April showers to bring us anything in the way of May flowers, but it isn't necessarily scientifically accurate, at least here in our neck of the woods in central Georgia. So 6.41 inches below average. We were flirting with the 7-inch mark before I left for out of town at the end of last week. So now it does look like we're still somewhere in between 6 and 7 inches below where we should be in 2026. And in total, we're still probably in the neighborhood of around 17 inches below where we should be for this drought as an entirety, dating back to September 1st as of last year. So all this data is taken as of April 29th. Let's talk about what's going to be ahead. Temperatures are going to cool down as we head into the beginning of the weekend, and really even as we go all the way into the beginning of next week. We'll talk about what time frames you're actually going to feel some of that cooler air. More rain will be present throughout Friday into Saturday, and we'll talk about why you shouldn't get dead set on the exact timing of this, but I am giving you a pretty large window where you are going to want to keep the rain jacket and the umbrella readily available and ready to go just in case you need it. Drying out starting on Sunday. That is going to be our first day without rain chances. In fact, I think we are going to begin to dry out a little bit earlier, but we still might keep a couple of sprinkle chances into the back half of your Saturday. But first things first, walking it around the quad, still can't get any glimpses of sunshine. It is an overcast start to the day, and we are taking those overcast skies into the afternoon, but not forecasting this cloud cover to remain widespread throughout all of the rest of this afternoon. We are going to have some gaps and some breaking apart in that cloud cover that lead to peaks of sunshine and will eventually let our temperatures creep up a little bit more than what you are seeing right now. So 71 in Macon. Our number actually a little bit warmer than what you see out to the west, where there is plenty of cloud cover and some rain-cooled air, where you are going to see those numbers scattered about the 60s. 77 in Panama City, 80 in Jacksonville, and 80 is going to take the cake for that warmest number that we see here in the East United States. And kind of a fine temperature gradient that you are seeing all across the state of Georgia. Some low 60s, upper 60s to the north of us, transitioning down into some low, some mid, and some upper 70s, and even values that are in the 80s already down in Florida. So there is a frontal boundary that is draped across the state right now. Some slightly cooler air to the north side of that frontal boundary, and some slightly warmer and more humid air that is going to be down to the south and the southeast of that boundary. So still holding on to the mid and upper 60s across the trail from Thomaston all the way up to Eatonton, transitioning into 70s, 71, 72s, 73, and then a couple of mid 70s already farther down to the south like Americus, McRae, Vidalia, and all the way over to Swainsboro in Emmanuel County. So we're starting to see this breeze begin to shift, and it's coming in from the north and the northwest, and that is going to usher in that slightly cooler and that slightly drier air mass. But overall, your wind's not too gusty, pretty widespread light breeze, anywhere from around 5 to maybe 8 miles per hour. Some areas not even dealing with anything in the way of a breeze so far. I don't think the winds are going to be too much of a factor over the course of the next couple of days. You might have some periods where the breeze does pick up just a tad bit, but this is going to be the telltale of our forecast in terms of where the rain chances are going to pop up, and of course, what it's going to feel like each and every morning and as we go into the afternoon. Because if we are to have some temperatures like we've seen as of the month of April, then humidity like this would result in some feels like numbers a little bit warmer than what the actual temperatures say, but that's not going to necessarily play too much of a role in your afternoon highs. I think the humidity levels more so is going to prevent the morning low temperatures from dropping down as low as they could. When you have a more humid start to the day, that is going to result in at least some warmer temperatures to walk out the door to, a bit more of a pleasant feel in the air. So we do see across most of the state of Georgia, we do have some light green at the very least, some splotchy areas of some dark green once you make your way down into Florida, closer to the Georgia coast, right outside of Savannah. But you're starting to see this area of no color pop up in the north and northwestern portion of the state, and that's going to continue to try to push down into central Georgia. But the frontal boundary isn't going to continue its slow path down towards the south and the southeast throughout the next couple of days. It is going to go down in South Georgia, and it's going to kind of park itself over the course of the next few days. So here's a look at your dew point temperatures. Lower 60s up to the northwest, just like your temperature map. The numbers and the values are going to be slightly cooler and slightly lower up to the north and the northwest, as opposed to down to the south and the southeast. Some might be spotting a cluster of some light rain over there closer to the I-85 corridor in eastern Alabama. We had our fair share of some spotty showers and some drizzles, maybe just some light, steady rain early this morning. That is no more, and in fact, we did have a cluster of some thunderstorms that moved through the northern portion of the state, some of which got really close to central Georgia. So maybe areas like Jasper, Putnam, and Hancock counties, you might have been awoken a bit prematurely to a rumble of thunder off in the distance. That was associated with a non-severe thunderstorm. The only severe thunderstorm warning that we had get even close to us was going to be just to the south of Augusta. And it's all attributed to this cluster that you now see down in southeast North Carolina and moving off into the Atlantic Ocean. That cluster of some thunderstorms was really widespread across South Carolina early this morning. but none of it really came to fruition here in central Georgia. We just kind of had a fairly quiet morning, and obviously the SPC put us in that low-end level 1 out of 5 risk for maybe a stronger to possibly even severe storm. Just didn't come to fruition, and that is going to continue to be something that you will hear us here on the weather team harp about over the course of the month of May, which we always talk about is MCS May. Danny DeSilva did a great breakout yesterday about what MCSs are, and you've probably heard Ansley Parker here on the extended forecast talking about these MCSs as of recent days. They're quite frustrating because they're very, very volatile. They can change. The timing, the coverage of rain can change in an instant, and the models don't do the best part of picking them apart because they're a smaller scale system. They're not widespread, and they're not a very large system like a typical frontal boundary would be. But nonetheless, we'll ramble about that a little bit more in just a little bit. 87 for a high temperature yesterday. Pretty drastic temperature difference compared to what we did see the day before, but 87 going to be about 5 degrees above average, kind of the same neighborhood for your morning low of 61 yesterday, 6 degrees above that average low of 55. So 87 kind of getting into the neighborhood of record high temperatures. Back in 2012, we saw a record high of 92. Nearly a half inch of rain has put that year departure just around 6.5 inches below where we should be at this point of the year. We definitely need some very substantial rain in order to dig us out of that hole. So here's a look at the month of April as we have one day to go, and that is going to be this afternoon for this calendar graphic. But even one day that we could maybe record a below average day, it's still going to put us at nearly a third of the total that we've seen for above average days for your high temperatures in the month of April. Yes, it has obviously been very, very warm, and a lot of these warmer numbers have not been associated with maybe an early start to the humidity creeping into the forecast. It's been associated with much drier air, and that's what's continued to lead to those drought conditions and the wildfire conditions, with the peak heating coming back on the 17th day of the month, April 17th. We hit that 90-degree mark for the first time, and a bit premature, about 2.5 weeks ahead of schedule before we're used to hitting that first 90-degree mark in a calendar year. So here's a look at your temperatures for the rest of today. Most numbers somewhere in the lower half of the 70s already, and we will make the climb into the upper half of the 70s later on this afternoon. I do believe areas in south and southeast central Georgia going to be a little bit warmer than areas up to the north and the northwest. And that's all going to be courtesy of that frontal boundary, creating that temperature difference from northwest down to southeast. So 79 going to be my high temperature. I think you'll be pretty close to that number, maybe even an 80 or an 81 farther down to the south. The Macon area, though, we might fall just short of that, but nonetheless, expect a general temperature range of somewhere in the upper 70s or maybe some near 80-degree numbers, which both of those ranges, they do fall short of your average high temperature of 82 degrees. So kind of funny that we could be ending the month of April with a below average high temperature after about 21 days out of those 30 have been above average. So we did have some morning rain. We did have some thunderstorms that got really close to us, but obviously now those rain chances are going to really taper off. We're only talking about a general about 10% chance of rain for the remainder of your Thursday now. But here's a look at your surface map where you will see that this frontal boundary is slowly driving down to the south and the southeast. It's all attached to this low pressure center, which might have moved a little bit farther over to the east since I last drew this graphic. But nonetheless, you can see what's on the top side of this frontal boundary, and that's going to be high pressure, which I imagine has definitely slidden over to the east just a little bit more, or actually maybe down to the southeast. That's where I'm kind of starting to see that clockwise flow over here in southeast Missouri and into southwestern Illinois. But this frontal boundary is going to move down towards the state line of Georgia and Florida. It's going to park itself there. And along with that, you can see how widespread it is. That is draping all the way across the Gulf Coast states and down into southern Texas, getting into northern Mexico. And then it does start to move up to the northwest just a little bit as you get over into New Mexico. But that frontal boundary will become stationary over the course of really later today, but all the way into when we get into the second day of your weekend on Saturday. And that is going to continue to be a bit of a conveyor belt or kind of a focal point for wave after wave of rain to move from west over to east, because once that boundary does become stationary, just like we talk about with the actual cold front shape it has right now, there's a lot of lift ahead of these boundaries, and that mechanism of lift is going to continue to enhance where rain chances do pop up, which is going to be down to the south, closer to where the boundary is stalled out. So for the rest of today, I promise you there will be some clearing in the clouds. You'll get some peaks of sunshine, and that's what's going to help lead to that warm up, say, in the upper half of the 70s later on today. Let's go ahead and talk about what we'll see as we go for the morning commute early on Friday morning. First things first, I guess I didn't really talk about it, but about a 10% chance of an isolated sprinkle or light shower through the remainder of your Thursday. Not too much to really put stock into in the way of rain chances. I think you can kind of treat the rest of your Thursday afternoon and evening as a break from the rain chances, because we're not going to get another break until we head into the back half of your weekend. So starting as early as Friday morning, I would go ahead and make plans to grab the rain jacket and grab the umbrella before heading out the door. You may dodge the rain. This isn't the most widespread cluster that I've seen on the models over the last couple of days, but there is going to be a chance in specifically southern central Georgia. You guys are going to have longer lasting rain and more periods of continuous rain, but not going to be a washout from Friday all the way through the first half of Saturday. But you are going to have a greater likelihood of catching some of these showers or maybe some sprinkles for the morning commute in south central Georgia as opposed to up to the north. But it is not out of the realm of possibility for, say, Macon to see some showers for that morning commute tomorrow. As we progress into the afternoon, it's still a story of on and off rain, some fairly dense cloud cover, and that's also another reason why your temperatures are going to be lower. Not just because of the frontal boundary, we are going to be on the northern side of it, but that cloud cover is going to do a pretty good job of blocking our sunshine throughout your Friday afternoon and your Saturday afternoon. So the combination of those two factors will really limit the warm up that we see into the afternoon time frame. Here's a look at Friday at 3 p.m. That's some pretty widespread rain. Now, of course, the timing of this rain, the intensity of this rain, that is going to continue to vary. This wave or round after round of rain that we're receiving, it is going to be a lot like those MCSs, those smaller scale systems that are moving across the frontal boundary from west over to east. So don't get too locked into the fact that, okay, maybe Friday at 3 p.m. it's looking like a washout. Pay attention to this, the intensity right now. I know this is going to be subject to change, but I think your pockets of some steadier and heavier rain will once again be farther down to the south. For the most part, it's going to be light and steady showers, and that is something that has been fairly consistent on Future View over the course of today. But the rain's still not wavering as we go all the way into your Friday afternoon and evening. I think the bulk of the rain, or the most widespread rain that we will see, is really going to come in Friday overnight into early on Saturday morning, more so closer to the late night hours on Friday and getting closer around midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. on Saturday. But we're still not getting rid of that rain as we go all the way into Saturday morning, a gloomy and a messy and a pretty dreary start to the day. And then finally, as we go into the later morning hours on Saturday, we are seeing the bulk of that rain finally move off to the east, starting to see some of the cloud cover break apart, not completely getting rid of the rain chances. And I don't think we really will throughout the entirety of Saturday. But Saturday, the second half of the day, is going to have a lot less likely of a chance of catching some showers until maybe we get into the evening. We could see the return of some sunshine, and that could heat up the surface just a little bit. But Future Views kept showing these rain chances mainly for northeast central Georgia as we go into the back half of your Saturday evening, Saturday night plans. Not near as widespread as what we see from Friday all the way into the first half of your Saturday. So we'll talk about the key notes with that rain. But once again, I want to go ahead and talk about the intensity of this, where we aren't seeing really any substantial totals whatsoever, except farther down to the south that you go. And the totals, in fact, what you see here, this gradient from northern central Georgia down to southern central Georgia, that is continuing all the way down to the south of us. So guess who's getting more rain than us here in central Georgia? Southern Georgia, the areas that absolutely need it in terms of those wildfires, in terms of how bad the drought is down there. So we are going to be very thankful for that. This isn't going to completely take us out of the drought by any means, but it is going to at least prevent it from worsening. And I do imagine it is going to help all those firefighters down in Brantley County, down in Clinch County, continue to contain those fires that are spreading, like I said, over hundreds and thousands of acres. So you shouldn't expect as much rain, say if you live in Jasper County compared to areas like Pulaski County, Dodge County, Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery counties. Just what the doctor ordered for these areas that haven't been lucking out with rain over recent weeks and really even going into recent months. So haven't changed the graphic yet, or at least our Excel sheet file, but I would put a 10% for the rest of Thursday. Obviously that 40% chance of a scattered shower or thunderstorm, that was just for the morning hours. The rain chances have now tapered off. Besides that 10% to kind of cover the bases rain chance for the rest of Thursday. For the rest of today, go ahead and expect a mix of sun and clouds. I would probably say more clouds than sun, but overall it is going to be maybe about a 60-40 trade-off. 60% cloud cover, 40% sunshine. Then going into Friday and Saturday, I don't want you to get too locked into these rain chances. The main thing for throwing a 70% on there, in all honesty, I think Central Georgia everyone will get some form of rain over the course of Friday into the first half of Saturday, but 70%, obviously due to the on and off nature of the timing of this, it's not going to be an all-day washout on Friday. It's not going to be an all-morning washout on Saturday. There will be periods where the rain is like that, but just continue to play it by ear. Make sure you have the raincoat ready to go in case you do need it. And like I mentioned with the cloud cover, that's going to be a dominating force along with that cooler air ushering in, where we should get the numbers back in the 50s as you walk out the door Friday and Saturday. And that's going to be a bit of a foreshadowing for what's to come as we get the skies to clear out and the cooler air that will usher in for the back half of the weekend. High temperatures still in the neighborhood of around 10 degrees maybe below average for Friday and Saturday. So obviously the month of May, maybe not even off to just a wet note, but also a below average start to the month, which I don't think we've been able to say for just about any month so far this year. So our next widespread rainmaker, that is looking to be mainly later Friday into Saturday morning. But I do believe areas farther down to the south, you could get an early start to the rain as soon as the morning commute comes around tomorrow. Moral of the story is all throughout Friday and for the first half of your Saturday, really even going into the afternoon on Saturday, just to be better safe than sorry. Keep the rain gear handy in case you need it. It's not a continuous rain for everyone. Areas farther south will see some longer lasting rain, and you are going to see some higher totals in areas farther up to the north. But I would say that the most widespread rain for Central Georgia as a whole, that's mainly going to arrive late Friday night, overnight Friday night into Saturday morning before finally we get into lunchtime on Saturday. And I do expect most of that rain to finally fizzle out. So here's what I'm going to be talking about in terms of the humidity. That frontal boundary, we continue to watch some drier air push in throughout the rest of today into tomorrow. And we are going to keep the light green in the forecast down in the southern portion of the state. And along with that, Central Georgia is still going to hold on to at least some moisture in the air compared to areas of the northern portion of the state. And then as we progress throughout Friday into Saturday morning, for Saturday afternoon, we're already looking at most of that moisture to push out of the picture, and then we just continue to watch any shade of light green whatsoever clear out of the forecast as we go into your Saturday afternoon and specifically the end of the weekend on Sunday. So high temperatures, can't remember the last time that we had a stretch of 5 days in a row with high temperatures in the 70s. All of these numbers being below average, but you can see there are signs of a warming trend as we wrap up the weekend and go into the beginning of next week. Morning low temperatures, this is where you're really going to feel that cooler air behind the front, and that's going to be Sunday into Monday, where both mornings are going to start out in the low and the mid 40s. We could even see some morning lows start to flirt with the 40-degree mark as you go into Sunday and Monday as we start the beginning of that first full work week of the month of May. And we're not going to have too much moisture to work with in the forecast until we start to get into the midweek next week, where I do anticipate the dew point temperatures to actually be a little bit greater than what they do say for the midweek next week. And that's going to be because we are eyeing our next rainmaker that will be on the horizon after a brief dry stretch. So for Sunday into Monday, I think we're looking good to go. We might reintroduce a 10% chance of a sprinkle throughout Tuesday afternoon, depending on how much moisture does rebound back into the forecast. And then on Wednesday into Thursday, that's where it looks like another widespread system is going to be to the north of us. But take a look at what the long-range models have it doing. About 6 days out, in fact, 7 days out ahead of time. This is all the way into next Thursday morning. Pretty good agreement on the timing and pretty good agreement that rain is going to be widespread down here in the southeast. It may come at the cost of a severe weather risk, but only time will tell. We'll have to continue to keep a close eye on that as we get closer and closer. But hey, even if it does bring us some severe thunderstorms, hopefully we can do without the tornado risk. Hopefully we can do without too much of the damaging winds, but we could definitely use some more substantial rainfall that does come along with those widespread severe weather makers. So here's a look at your 7-day forecast. It will be a dry stretch as we go all the way into the beginning of next week, Cinco de Mayo next Tuesday, and then 20% chance of a shower or a thunderstorm as we go into next Wednesday. Still a little bit vague about what time that rain is going to move in, but until then, you need to plan to have the rain jacket ready for that first day of May and the first half of Saturday at the very least, but I would go ahead and keep it around for at least those first 2 days of the weekend, and then you can throw it in the back of the closet as you go into Sunday. That's going to do it for your extended forecast here this Thursday. We'll help you plan out your weekend tomorrow once again, coming back here at 11 a.m.